Hi, everyone. This is Sam King from the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. I'm excited to be joined today by my friend and classmate Gabe LePage, who graduated from the joint MDiv and Masters of Environmental Management program at Yale in 2023. So, welcome, Gabe. Thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thanks, Sam.
We'd love to start this conversation, Gabe, by just hearing a little bit more about your journey into the world of religion and ecology. We'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you became so passionate about this intersection.
Well, that it's like asking for my life story. Yeah, I think my journey into it, yeah, started way back with first just, I grew up in the missionary community in East Africa, in Nairobi, Kenya, um, with my parents doing kind of Christian relief and development work. So
Mhm.
I was able to grow up with a faith that was connected to poverty issues. It wasn't disembodied. It was, yeah, connected to loving the poor and put into practice.
Mhm.
Um, and then a mom who just loved being outdoors, grew up in Montana and would always kind of take us outdoors hiking. And so when I went to undergrad at Calvin College, I wanted both to follow my father's footsteps and study poverty alleviation and also do something with the environment, something environmental. So I ended up studying geography,
Mhm.
uh, which kind of became a container to think about place and identity and wealth and inequality, um, and really apply that in the US. So that was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So a lot of those questions are what ended up eventually bringing me to Yale and doing the religion and ecology program of both, yeah, studying faith and Christian identity and asking questions about like how do we make a living out of the land um, in a way that lets us live here for a long time to come. Um, and then those big questions of who's we, um, and all that. Yeah, the big questions about race and American identity, Christian identity. Um, yeah, how do we become a people? Um, yeah, at the scale of the kingdom of God. Who are we? Who are we tied to? Who are we bound to?
Mhm.
So those big questions are a quick summary.
Yeah, totally. And asking those big questions will land you at a place like Yale Divinity School or the School of the Environment to explore. And we'd love to just hear for our audience a little bit more about that experience. And I think something very unique that you brought to this community was both studying the academic side of forestry issues, climate issues, faith and justice issues related to care for creation, and then also your like hands-on work in the community with the Yale Divinity Garden, which I know you were helping to steward for years during your time here, and then your work with the Urban Resources Institute, planting trees and working on urban forestry. So give us a sense for how you combined your academic interests with like hands-on community work.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So before I came to Yale, I worked in Grand Rapids as a community listener, a community connector. Um, so that commitment to putting the ideas I was learning in school into practice and like taking some of that Christian theology, the theology of the incarnation, that words need are made flesh, and that's this kind of idea
Mhm.
about Christ. But I kind of take that to study too, of like, okay, how is this put into practice? How can we live it out? And so when I came to Yale, I was, yeah, looking for a job. and I saw the Urban Resources Initiative job posting that they had this program where, as a Yale intern, you could go out and plant trees, and they had an employment program for people coming out of prison. So they partnered with a group called Emerge that would provide a support network, um, and then connect them with employers like URI. So we would go around the city of New Haven and plant trees, and residents can request them for free. Um, so to be able to like practice um, what they had framed as like thinking about urban systems, and this was one of the first classes I took at the School of the Environment, urban ecology, where you would map systems of the city, human and ecological systems, look for negative feedback loops, like recidivism. Somebody's comes out of prison, goes back in. That's not good for them. It's not good for the government agencies that have to pay for that. Um, and then lack of tree cover. It's hotter. There's more flooding if there's less trees. So all the ecological benefits of trees. So they're putting all those together and then convincing the city to pay for it as green infrastructure and is it getting people jobs? So anyway, to be able to find a group like URI that's putting all that into practice is such a gift. And
Mhm.
from the School of the Environment, they're not coming at it theologically, but I go there and I'm like, the gospel is all over this of like practicing mercy, creating pathways of hope and opportunity, and a practice of healing our landscape. Um,
Mhm.
I was just honored to be part of it.
Yeah. And it's so powerful that, you were doing this work here in a city that has really suffered from the consequences of industrialization through the Winchester Arms repeating company, which, poisoned a lot of the soil with lead, and as well as local airways,
Yeah,
and the history of redlining that has caused so much racial disparities and suffering, particularly for the city's Black community. And
yeah.
so I think it's really powerful that you're bringing together the environmental justice concerns with the social justice concerns of planting trees and expanding forest cover in historically disenfranchised areas.
Yeah, again, I was honored to be part of the work URI was doing. They did a big study on like why certain groups requested trees. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, and they found out that like in redlined areas, part of the challenge is there's not as much room for trees because houses were built close together or there wasn't as much space. So those histories of like the industrial workers housing that was smaller, yeah, have these long-lasting ecological effects that affect the quality of air and soil for majority Black populations, but for all of us. When it becomes an environmental problem, that makes the world less clean for everybody. Um, so
Yeah. No, it's a really fascinating linkage. And I still remember when you helped me build a raised bed, which was about a quarter mile away from that industrial plant on Winchester Avenue.
right.
And I remember, you educating me about, the pollution of that soil and the need to grow above ground, right? And um, for communities that have been in that region for generations, I think firsthand the way that both the land and the human communities have been deprived of the benefits of biodiversity, the benefits of tree cover. And I know there've even been studies about the relative lack of bird species as well in um, communities that lack adequate green spaces. And I think it's very interesting that you were highlighting those disparities.
Yeah, that was such a fun time. That was such an organic thing of we were, neighbors and, as Yale students were living in that neighborhood, affected by, yeah, the
Mhm.
carelessness that allowed
Yeah.
areas to be poisoned.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, practicing healing by like, yeah, knowing our neighbors, practicing caring for the land in our backyard. Um,
Mhm.
but then that is actually a kind of road to healing in the midst of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you've really embodied that, both that communal spirit and that desire to heal the land. And I've really admired the work you've done with community forestry and planting food forests in particular. And I'd love to hear more if you could describe about your work at the Divinity Gardens and your work planting food forests in and around New Haven.
hmm. I didn't quite get to food forests in New Haven. We planted a few fruit trees at the Div Farm. They were gracious to let us expand the garden a little bit, and work with some students at YSC. And we had a team of, I think we get up to six, at least five, students working at the Div Farm at different points. So we were working together, um, and just, yeah, provide a space for students to come together, get their hands in the soil, talk about something other than classes, practice ecological care on the land where they studied. Um, was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Getting to like put in fruit trees. We invited some students to adopt them and help water, um, which became, a practice of going out and watering a couple times a week, um, before going up to class and studying all the big ideas you study at div school.
Mhm.
Care for a little fruit tree that will then, feed the generations of students after you. It's this little microcosm of what we do in our lives. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the idea of food forests, of, planting your landscape with edible perennials, whether fruit trees or perennial vegetables, um, taking a little bit from the ideas of permaculture, which is, influenced by indigenous ways of thinking, of like, how do we recognize that the land is going to be here a long time after us
Mhm.
and try and take care of it in a way that will bless the generations of people to come after us and not be a curse like the gun factory was. Um, so, um, yeah, I'm living down in Chattanooga, Tennessee now, and working with the Food Forest Coalition that I've, again been blessed to fall into. And it's, we're just getting started, less than a year old, still getting established. And yeah, so this last year we were able to get 56 little baby trees out there, that in a couple years we hope will bear a lot of fruit. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, just practicing in that small way, um, making decisions that could provide a more abundant future. Um,
Totally. I love how you're thinking about, the deep past and the deep future, thinking generationally, right? When it's so easy to get pulled into a more short-term horizon with like election cycles, political cycles, but to really think about the arc of ecological history and the lifespan of trees spanning decades, sometimes hundreds of years, and really think about how do we expand edible commons and really guarantee food security in the midst of a changing climate, especially among poor communities and urban communities, that are often so dependent on rural areas for their sustenance, right? So to expand access to edible nuts and fruits, for generations, I think is such a powerful legacy. I know I read recently Robin Wall Kimmerer's recent book, The Service Berry, which talks about, the gift of service berries for human communities and also birds like cedar waxwings and robins. And the tree, um, actually the seeds are uh, incubated through the guts of these birds, which helps the tree to propagate, right? And I think about like how to, as Kimmer invites us into, how do we practice that kind of reciprocity in the way we structure our urban spaces and our communities? So, would love to hear a little bit more about like what do you vision for Chattanooga and for the communities you're working with, and like how they relate with these forests.
Yeah, our hope is that they become just what you're talking about, a commons, a place of mutual giving, a place you can volunteer and kind of make your mark in terms of caring for the land, planting a tree that'll last beyond you.
Hmm.
Um, and we're focused on working in publicly accessible spaces. Um, so in some parks next to community centers, on a church property, some nonprofit properties, public housing site. Um, And yeah, we want them publicly uh like accessible for people to come in and pick what they want and then harvesting what there's too much of to distribute to those who need it. So will it solve all hunger issues? Maybe not, but it'll improve nutrition and
Hmm.
it'll improve the mental health of those involved as we have a place where we belong to. We can see each other and engage in a society that's gotten more and more digital and afraid,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and practice being together. You know, you might
Hmm.
run into people who have different thoughts than you, but
Hmm.
you're caring for the same land, for the same community, and to rethink of our communities as the places that we live and not just the institutions that we're part of.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
seems really important for this like social fabric of our country. Um, so those are some of the things we're hoping for. And then by being present, being able to build the social trust to deal with other issues, um, whether, paying attention to the homeless camps that are nearby, some of the places we're doing food forests, and, you know, being aware about that, being part of conversations that are trying to imagine, a more merciful world. Um,
Hmm.
seeing, illegal dumping happening nearby some of the sites and being able to work with other nonprofits to navigate the city processes to get that stopped. Um,
Hmm.
but the real challenges of food security in a place like Tennessee is that, we're developing so fast that we're losing farmland. And there's great local journalists here, especially a group called Food is a Verb that's speaking up and telling that story locally. Um, if we don't protect an economy of farmers, um, we're gonna have to import all our food from other places. Where right now, so many of our vegetables come from immigrant farm workers. Um, so yeah, protecting the economies that grow our food, that's the bigger question. But I hope that in inviting community groups to engage, and yeah, pretty small food forests can learn like what it takes to grow food, the complications of it, the
Hmm.
okay, you want to grow apples, but well, that's going to get a lot of diseases, and just learning
Hmm.
the details of that or what it takes to get healthy soil, to have a little more context for what the folks who are really doing the work of feeding us are up against. Um, and if they have to compete economically with uh, land costs tied to housing and you know bigger business developments,
Hmm.
that's a tough one. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, protecting farmland. Again, those are some of the conversations
Hmm.
that, people working at these gardens are going to have all kinds of different views on, but it's a place to have those conversations.
Totally, totally. And, you know, in this very divisive political climate we're living in, it seems to me that these common spaces, these civic places, um, like gardens, like food forests that bring us together in person in our embodied selves to really get to know our neighbors and interact with the community,
Mhm.
is just so transformative, right? It's easy to form a judgment about somebody through an online forum or from across a digital impasse, but when you're getting your hands in the soil and coming together with members of your community, it really, I think, has the potential to really bridge so many divides. And so I'm glad that you're working to protect these common spaces. And, certainly in the midst of the climate crisis, we need to be adaptable and find new ways of growing food amidst, more intense droughts, more intense rainfall in other regions, unpredictable weather patterns. And so it seems to me that finding these more diverse ways of cultivating food is going to be really important for withstanding and enduring the climate disruptions we're facing.
Absolutely. Um, and that's, yeah, some of the bigger conversation. We put so much work into keeping our landscape the way it is. We pay a lot of money to mow and a
Hmm.
lot of money to, yeah, to landscape, often with, ornamental plants and to be part of the conversation of can you work in, natives that provide local habitat, to the
Hmm.
creatures that have lived here a long time? And then can you put in uh, plants that are edible, um,
Hmm.
that also look good? Um, so all that work that we put in to kind of curate our landscapes, can we do it in a way that also feeds people?
Yeah.
Uh, so part of the work is trying to overlap those circles of thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and think, can we manage our land for the common good?
Totally. Totally. And I love how you're expanding our idea of the commons to include the more than human world, right? The bird world, the insect world, all these creatures that we depend on for our sustenance, our food security, and then also, as a sense of earthly kin, right? All these other beings and respecting their right to habitat at a time of precipitous declines in monarch populations and bee populations and migratory birds. And so I love how you're reimagining how we might cultivate these common spaces and perhaps rewild lawns into native meadows and food forests and how much vitality that can bring back to our human communities as well. Gabe, I'd love to hear you. I know you're in the ordination process too,
Yeah.
to become a Episcopal priest, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey for you as we come to a close here, and then like what kind of priest you want to become and how you might integrate that with your care for a common home.
Hmm. That is a good question. I think growing up, I thought I would kind of work on poverty alleviation work through my career, and then maybe when I was old and wise, become a priest, after a lot of experience. And but being at the divinity school, those kind of doors opened quicker,
Mhm.
'cause in that space. But yeah, I first kind of started thinking about it, back when I was a community connector. I was involved in several different churches in the Grand Rapids area, and one of them was, uh, St. Philip's an Episcopal Church, a historically African American Episcopal Church.
Mhm.
And yeah, just in that community work of trying to discover, the gifts of a neighborhood and honor and provide platforms for people to, love each other at that local level. Um, the warden at that church, one of the, people on the vestry, uh, yeah, just invited me to think about becoming a priest someday. Because
Mhm.
just a hunger for I guess, that kind of energy in the church. So that was one of the early invitations. So yeah, I mean, for me, my motivation behind all of this work is, yeah, to work with churches on justice and environmental issues as a proclamation of the gospel that, God so loved the world that he gave his only son.
Mm,
Um, so it's all about a practice of love. So to be a priest to me is to like hold that space, to have a community of people to remember that we are beloved and then free to love others,
mhm,
that we have been shown mercy and can then show mercy to others.
mm,
Um, yeah, and we're forgiven and can forgive others.
mm,
And so, how do we practice that care and receive all the gifts that God has given,
mhm,
the land, the creatures, each other, um, and offer them back to God? So that's just, yeah, theological imagination of just seeing the whole world is blessed.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and, you know, the sky, the earth, the sea are all in this grand liturgy of worshiping God and entering into the liturgy and worship of the church to be a part of that.
mm,
It's to remember that bigger liturgy.
mm,
Um,
mm,
so I think that would be my hope is to walk with people in that imagination, um,
mm,
of seeing each other through, yeah, the work of a loving creator, um,
mm, mm,
who would become weak and become a human and give himself for us.
mm, mm,
And to then, as the, the line from the liturgy of the Episcopal Church, to walk in love as Christ has loved us. And
mm,
that's the call. So it's
mhm,
not, to save everything, to fix everything in the world, but to stand and witness to the love of God in the face of it. Um,
mhm,
where there's a feeling of losing a lot right now, um, a lot of change, a lot of political crisis. Um, but to stand in that witness of love and not give in to fear. And in light of a God who has worked, through history, usually in Israel and through the church that has outlasted empires,
mm.
create a kingdom based on love and not on fear. Um, so I hope to be in a place of freedom to tell the truth and to not be caught up in abstractions, but to tell the truth about particular love of particular people in the place that you live. Um, and in practicing that love of your neighbor, um, from all backgrounds, from all places, all people made in the image of God. Yeah, to use that as a guiding star of how to go forward. So
Mhm.
those are some of the things stirring in my soul as I go on that journey.
Beautifully said, Gabe. And I think that's a wonderful capstone to our conversation today. And I certainly am wishing you, many blessings on your journey and would love to sit in your parish one day when you become a priest and yeah, enter with you in this expansive moral imagination that you're inviting us into and this cosmic liturgy that you spoke to. Uh, yeah, such a wonderful vision and to re-inhabit and see as blessed the places that we inhabit. You know, that's something I'll also take with me from what you shared. So thank you, Gabe, and I wish you all the best with your ongoing work. And I'm just grateful to be connected as fellow classmates and friends. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks,
many
Sam, for this invitation and for your friendship.